Welcome to Archispeak, a fortnightly podcast about all things architecture. My name is Evan Troxel, and I'm one of your hosts along with Neil Pan and Cormac Phelan. Have you ever wondered what it's like to work in the profession of architecture? Have you ever worked with an architect? Have you ever wanted to be an architect? Maybe you're in school and don't know what you're getting yourself into, or perhaps you know exactly what it's like because you've been working in the profession for a long time.
Welcome to episode 98 of the Archispeak podcast. I'm Neil Pan.
I'm Evan Troxel. You're planning on changing the world.
And this episode of Archispeak is sponsored by Arcat. Check out all the features they offer at arcat.com, and we'll talk a little bit more about them later in the show. But first up, we have a special announcement to make.
Woo, yeah, special announcement. I just wanted to let everybody know that if you've been following along on my blog, I've been kind of releasing a little bit of information week by week because I've been working my butt off on a new book that I've been writing for the last 7 months. So I wanted to let everybody here know who's listening, especially those of you out there who are unlicensed, because the topic of the book is getting your license. How to create the space that you need in your life to do what it takes to get licensed. So it's strategies, advice. Many of you know, who've been listening to the podcast for the past few years that I got licensed in 2014. So I basically went through the whole process while we've recorded this podcast. And while we didn't talk about it a whole lot, it came up a few times. And so there's just a lot of good information in there. I'm a dad. I've got 4 kids and a podcast and a career, and I like to go outdoors and do all kinds of stuff. So how do you create the time that is required to pull off such a thing? And then also for just students who are going to graduate and get their license after that, what does it take? What do you need to expect? What's it like? All the kind of stuff that we kind of talk about on this podcast as far as what it's like to get into the field of architecture, the profession of architecture. This is that type of information, but for licensure specifically. So if you want to know more about that, I'll give you a website address that you can go to and just sign up to get notified when it's ready, so then you can check it out. And that is arehacks.com. And if you go to that website, you can just sign up to be notified when the book becomes available. And that's it. I just wanted to let everybody know. Thanks for giving me a minute to share that, guys.
And I've read probably about 40 pages of it so far, and it's going to be useful. It's going to be, it's like, wait, I've made that excuse. Whoa, this is ways to get around all of that. So I'm looking forward to finishing the book and also finishing other things. And,
hitting a little close to home there, Cormac?
Yeah. It's making me realize how bullshit some of my excuses really are. It's like, which is good, which is needed. Anyway.
Yeah. Wow. Well, it sounds like a great book, Evan. Congratulations on doing it and getting very close to the finish line here. We're real proud of you.
It's been a labor of love. It's definitely tons and tons of effort to write a book. I've never written a book before, and so this is one of those things that I've always been interested in trying to figure out. And so once I dove into it, it's been an enjoyable process. It's also been difficult and challenging and all those things. So it's really stretched me in a lot of ways to become a better writer and editor and all that kind of stuff. So it's completely self-published, completely every single aspect of it I've really taken on. And it's been a great project. It's also just been really time-consuming. So I hope it does really help people. That's the whole idea, is that I want to help more people get licensed. The profession needs great architects. I say that in the book. And so I want to help make that happen. And I think that this is just one of those kind of guides that will help people get licensed, know what to expect, and help them get through the process a little bit easier. So that's it.
Awesome. What's the website again?
arehacks.com. And that just basically goes to the front page of my website where you can sign up and get notified when it becomes available. I won't send anything else through that email address. So once you sign up there, you can rest assured that it will only be used to let you know when the book becomes available.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks.
So you had a great topic I think we wanted to dive into tonight. You want to explain to everybody what that was?
Yeah, so I guess one of the things that I've always been interested in, there's actually 2 aspects to, I guess, the natural process that people go through, and we'll talk about one of them tonight. The first one that we're not going to talk about is just the transitions between high school or junior college and a university going into an architecture program and kind of what that's like, the kind of shell shock of that. It hits close to home for me because I have a son who just started high school, and tonight he was just like, man, high school's hard, Dad.
Yeah.
So it was one of those things where I said, yeah, and it only gets harder. So it's one of those transition period in the life of an architect, and that one's interesting. But the other one that I want to talk about tonight is really the second one, which is the transition from the studio environment to the office environment. And so we talked a little bit in one of the last 2 episodes, I can't remember which one, about...
Last episode was talking about going back to school.
Yeah, back to school, like how to survive school, right? So we talked a little bit about that, but I think that there's some things here that we could probably get into about what to expect when we talked about how to work in different size offices, and we all work in kind of similar sized offices, I guess. We're all in medium-sized firms, I would say, right?
Yeah.
So I think that, but we've worked in different sized firms, but maybe what to expect when you get in, like what's different between the studio and working in a corporate office? What changes and how to navigate that? So that's the idea for the topic.
One of the difficult things when you go from the studio environment to the office environment, at least for me, was the fact that, there's the basic things, right? You have to show up at a certain time, or there's an expectation of time you have to be there, time you leave, and also to maybe what you're wearing, right? There's like an office dress code. You're not showing up in your PJs and flip-flops or, whatever you're in studio in. I think there's that difference. There's also some of the basic differences of you're in a corporate environment or an office sort of environment. So there's maybe not loud music playing or just cussing and swearing. Lots of things that probably happen a little more openly and freely in the studio environment, right? That doesn't happen in the corporate environment. So I think there's a bit of a expectation change, and it may be, I think one of the things you had listed was cubicles, or the subtitle kind of cubicles and efficiency versus creativity and art, because there is that sense of you're so creative because you're so much more free in a studio environment, and that can be, the dress and ability to go in and out whenever you want, other than, say during studio time when your professor's there. But it just feels like it's much more creative in that environment than when you go to the corporate environment and you're doing the 9 to 5, and you're probably not working on something that is maybe as interesting at first. So I think there's some of those basic things that hit you right in the face as soon as you make that change.
And that's actually probably one of the hardest adjustments of really any adjustment, is that the rigor of the 9 to 5, because as we all know, and I'm pretty sure your studio is just like my studio was, is that you did have that freedom. You did come in, maybe I feel like I should go out drinking for a little while and then come back and work in the middle of the night instead of, and you don't really have those kind of like freedoms to do that kind of stuff when you're in the studio. I mean, when you're, out in the real world, because projects actually even though there are similarities that projects in studio do demand, very much a similar rigor, you don't take it as serious. There doesn't feel like there's any consequences to it. But when you're in the real world, and I don't want to make it sound like the studio's not the real world, but when you're doing the 9 to 5 job and you're punching in and you're doing what you need to do to get a actual building built, people aren't really ready for that transition. And that's something that we've talked about in the past, about this disconnect between the studios or architecture school in general and the profession, is how much does it really prepare students for becoming a working professional?
Well, let's not talk about all the negative things here. Let's talk about one of the positive things. Studio environment. You're paying to be there, right? And suddenly, in the corporate environment, you're getting the positive side is,
I see where you're going.
The positive side is you're in the corporate environment. You're actually getting paid to be there, which is kind of cool, actually. To me, that's something that is a positive, right, of moving from school to profession. You're actually going to, you're you're making money, and you're furthering your career, right? The studio environment is that first step, and now you're making the next step. So there's some positives too.
I think there's an important distinction in there to just kind of build on what you just said too, is you're building your career. And one thing I think to realize early on when you go to work for an office is that the more you're willing to invest in yourself, or to get other people to, maybe you can convince other people to invest in you and advocate for you, the better the entity will do. And I think that is a disconnected thought for most people. Most people go and work in an office, and they do what they're told, and they show up on time, and they leave on time, and they do what they need to do during the hours of the day. But what I think really successful people do when they go to work for an office is they identify where holes are in themselves or in the company, and they try to find ways to fill those holes, to do things better, for instance. And when you figure out what those things are, you are making yourself better, but you're also making the company better. And those are the types of things that really make a difference. And those aren't, I guess we kind of feel like that when we're in school, right? We want to do well on our projects when we're in school, but we're not doing it for the betterment of the school, right? It's very selfish. You're trying to get a good grade.
Right,
you're trying to do well in studio. You're maybe trying to win some design award or whatever. But it's very personal. When you go to work for a company, all of a sudden, it's very important, I think, to realize, depending on the company you go work for, but I think this is a general statement that holds pretty true, is you are part of a team, and the team does better if you help the team, right? And so I think it's hard for a lot of architects or architecture students who, what's the right word? When you are basically matriculating into the career field, to shift from that very personal, selfish, in podcasting quotes, view, and switch that over to you are there to help the endeavor do better, right? You are part of a team. You're all in it together. And I mean, we struggle with this. The big global we as architects struggle with this because there's still a lot of people in the firm who are advanced in their age who are still really selfish, and they want to shine above everybody else. And I think it does a disservice to the whole company because they are not mentoring students, they're not mentoring interns or younger people in the firm, because they don't want to spend their time on that. They want to spend their time developing contacts and bringing in business and making themselves look good. And I think that just does a disservice to the whole company. So if you can take on the viewpoint of you are there to help everybody do better, and if you're working at a place where people really feel like that, I think that is definitely something to look out for, because that kind of well-oiled machine aspect to the whole thing really goes a long way, and morale is higher, and people seem to do better in those kinds of environments.
Hey, Evan, I wanted to ask you, because part of your subtitle here was cubicles and efficiency versus creativity and art. What's your what's the effect of a cubicle do to a person in an architectural office? Or do you work in cubes, or what sort of work environment is your studio at your office? Let's start with that.
So that's a really good thing to bring up, I think, because I think most offices don't look like the studio environment that we're used to seeing in school. And I haven't seen a lot. I've done a lot of research trying to find images of just different studios, and they're always a lot more clean and corporate than the design studio. The design studio is a freaking mess, right? And that, I think, is the charm of it. And it also tells you visually, just by looking at it, that creative stuff happens there. Right? That, to me, is what I see. I mean, a lot of people who aren't in architecture see it as a complete freaking mess. But I think that also is the mess that enables us to do the work that we do creatively. And I'm coming from a designer standpoint here, so I could see how other people might take issue with what I'm saying. But what do you think about that?
Well, I was going to ask. I mean, because you said it earlier about how when you're in school, it's more personal. It's about you. It's about your personal endeavors to get your degree and get out. So you can get into that corporate environment, and so
or hang out as long as possible.
Hang out as long as possible.
Some people take that tact.
Yeah. But what they tend to do is that I think that the disarray and kind of like what we consider the beautiful mess of a architecture school studio is really about it reflects the individual endeavors, whereas in the corporate office it's more about kind of like the collective. And so that's why it looks a little bit cleaner.
I kind of see it different. I kind of feel like the cubicle environment is like, here's the boundaries. This stuff is mine.
Well, but
that's how I kind of see it.
There's different corporate environments. Now, I've worked in a cubicle type environment where it's actual isolationism. It's walled off.
Like tall
it's
cubes.
me. It's it's
right.
Don't come past those boundaries. It literally felt like the Berlin Wall working behind there. I was I felt so detached from everybody else. And now I work in an office that has what we call pods, and they're lower walls. There's kind of a collection of 4 desks that are kind of formed like 2 little U's facing inwards towards each other, and that people can pass through the pods, and they often do. And a lot of times that kind of fosters people to stop and say, hey, what are you working on? Or they kind of glance over at your monitor and realize that you're looking up some YouTube you're working on something really, really nice that they really want to see.
Yep.
And
researching a product on ArcCat?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. But what that does is I think that there are degrees of the cubicle life that both hinder the kind of productivity that the studio had, where the studio, you could kind of like glance over because there were no walls. It was just, I'm speaking just purely of Auburn's, is that just a bunch of tables. And, we had a bunch of
I think that's typical. Yeah.
And so you could see what was going on, and you could kind of like feed off of other things and other people's work.
Well, and there's lots of sharing.
Right.
I think that is an environment of, the boundaries are very blurred, right? So what's mine is yours, what's yours is mine, and there's materials and there's tools, and things do walk away. But it's most of the thing I can think of, like when I see studios like that, is like, oh yeah, like here's resources at our fingertips. Let's all do our stuff and get it done together. Like I know that I was saying earlier that it's very personal and selfish, but at the same time there is a camaraderie felt between studio mates, right? That is we're all working on this project, even though we're turning in individual projects. Ideas are informing other ideas, and people are sharing materials and late nights and good times, and you're building communities. And I think to me, cubicles kind of send the other message, which is,
you're right.
It's really compartmentalized. This is my stuff. That's your stuff. And to me, that is not a creative space. And that's, I guess, what I tend to think of when I enter it, when I use it, that's what I feel when I see it.
Well, maybe it might be interesting for each of us to kind of set the stage of how each of us, what is it like to go into work each day for each of us? What do you think is conducive to kind of the open dialogue environment, and what you think maybe your firm can do a little bit better? I mean, it would be interesting to kind of understand how each of us, because though there are similarities with all of our different firms because of the sizes and things like that and the project types and all, but there could be absolute distinct differences. Like I said, firms that I've worked for in the past purely felt like it was an isolationist because it was a cubicle farm and nobody talked to anybody, and there was no, as bad as it sounds, I mean, you could tell in their work that it wasn't a collaborative environment. And I'm curious, how can you tell in your work, or how can you tell in your environments that you're either successful or failing at kind of this open dialogue or this open collaboration?
Well, I actually, before we go there, I just have a quick question. And Evan, I know you've taught more recently in schools than I've been visiting any studios, but how has the computer changed? First off, how has the computer changed the studio environment? What I'm curious to know is, has the computer created a little bit more of a isolated environment in the studio which is a little different than the very much messy, collaborative environment you just described, which was desks and everything is open. And at least from my perspective, now, when I was in school, yes, Cormac, cue the old jokes, we didn't have computers in the studio.
Me? Make fun of you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, make fun of me. Anyway, we didn't have computers in the studio, right? So when everybody was working, now...
Didn't have computers on the planet.
I think you said last time they're like the size of a room.
Yeah, I think so. We could check the tape on that.
Check the
tape.
Get a playback.
At Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, we had the desks, and actually they were really nice. They would long before nowadays a lot of corporate offices get the standing desks. They go up and down. We had
they were all standing back then.
Well, no, actually we had
chairs
desks
weren't invented.
Oh my God! Really?
Anyway,
quit interrupting me. This is a pain in the ass to edit. Anyway, leave it all in. Exactly. So, no, what I was getting at is that at Cal Poly, we actually had these metal frames. They were kind of open, like L-shaped frames that you could pin stuff up on or tape things to, or literally some people screwed pegboards in and stuff. So we could create a little bit of that isolation, but it was very open because it was not all not all boarded up, but not quite just desks where everything was flat everywhere, where you could see all the way across the room. But I'm curious, what has been your experience when you were teaching, the effect of the computer on that open sort of environment in studio?
Well, from my experience, it didn't change it at all because everybody has laptops, and laptops are a tool and they're not precious in architecture school. They've got stickers all over them, and you just throw it on the desk, and sometimes you're plugged in, sometimes you're not, and it's just another tool that's on the desk.
Okay.
At least at Cal Poly here, there's just everybody still has a drafting size table, and there's modeling equipment, for analog models all over it, and there are cutting mats, and people are still building physical models, and it just becomes another tool, and obviously it's used for other classes besides studio too, but it's very much just an extension of the same studios we had when we were in school.
Okay.
When I was in school, we were transitioning from hand to computer, and people there was no such thing as like a real laptop back then. I mean, everything was just enormous, right? We had CRT monitors, and so people did bring those in, and they did lock them in their own cubicles that they built just for security. But for the most part, most people didn't do that back then. But now it's just everybody has a laptop, and you might see a few extra larger monitors that are kind of chained to a desk or something. But other than that, it's just I don't think it's that much different.
We had where we didn't even have computers in the studios, and we weren't. And this was just before the transition where they were making students kind of bring their own laptops in. But it was just labs. It was all lab-based. In the studio, we had probably a few workstations for computers, but we didn't have, a laptop at every desk. And now I'm pretty sure, in fact, I think the last time I walked through ours, the labs are still there for things like BIM training and stuff like that, but they really it's a tool on your desk. There's, the rolls of trace, there's the laptop, there's the tablet, rulers and things like that. And so it was, it's kind of an integrated
rulers. What?
A scale.
What do you call those things? Okay. A scale.
I forgot.
A scale. Okay.
Had a brain
lab.
lab.
You know what that's like. Come on, in your advanced years.
Old. Okay.
Anyway, so my ruler, I had my ruler on my desk as well as my laptop and all that other stuff. So anyway, I did go to school in Alabama, so got to say it like that. But anyway, so I mean that was kind of the way it is, and to be quite honest with you, that's the way it is now at our office. Is that we've got very much a similar thing going on where we all have. Well, I don't say we all have, but everybody has drafting tables available to them. I have one that's like right next to me, so like within my pod where we've got four desks for 4 different people. Each of those are kind of subdivided with a drafting table that 2 people can share. And so, we still have that. We still use it. Still got tons of trace. We still have tons, and everybody has their computer workstation and materials, material boards and samples and everything else are all laid out. And it's nice and open enough. And it does harken back to a more studio-based environment. But because everybody's more doing production, you'll find 9 times out of 10 people will be staring more at their computer than all of the other person.
Glued to the glowing screen.
Glued to the glowing screen.
Yeah.
And I think that's the big difference between what the work environment is and stuff, where it changes from the always on the go kind of, we're designing and we're doing more analog type stuff. It's on the trace, it's on this, it's on that. Maybe I'll integrate and stop a little bit and do a little bit of photoshopping and stuff like that. But then I keep jumping back and forth between things, and I guess in a way that's sort of the same thing as what we do every day, right? I mean,
no.
Okay,
no.
So what's your environment?
No, I just meant bouncing around in different programs. For the most part, at least for what I'm doing right now, it's pretty much you open your CAD app. I mean, we're using AutoCAD, but in my office.
And you shut up and work. Yeah. You just pretty much, it's all day in that environment. Not entirely for me all day, but that's the majority of what I'm doing. So when you talk about bouncing around, I'll sketch here. Depends on the deadline, right?
Yeah, probably, and exactly what phase of the project you're working in. Right now, we're headed toward a submittal for several projects that I'm working on. So it's very, my mindset right now is very much getting a lot of things done, and kind of in that
drawing,
a lot of drawing right now. But I wanted to ask you guys if you think that this change, we keep talking about the studio environment, how much that feels very creative and open, that you're moving and doing different things. Why is it that our corporate environments don't absorb that similar sort of office feel to them? Because my office is like yours, or Cormac, a little bit more like yours. We kind of have pods as well, where there's 4 of us sitting kind of in a U-shaped, and we have a planning table in between us that we can share and use, but there's no drafting capabilities to any of this. And what I find doesn't really work is that we're all sitting in each of the 4 corners.
Right, yeah.
Not facing each other.
And that's what we do too.
But that's not a collaborative sort of environment, right? Because if I need to talk to somebody about something, I have to stop what I'm doing, turn and look behind me 180 degrees, or I guess 45 in 2 different directions. But it's just
pretend you didn't see what's on the monitor.
That's efficiency of space. That's just a space usage, I guess.
No, I disagree with that. I can give you our example, but yeah, go ahead. It's not efficient.
Well,
I think because I don't think it lends itself to the job.
I'm saying that it's just the use of space, so everybody's kind of like sandwiched in the corner of, let's just call it a square. It's open in the middle, and everybody's sandwiched into the corners, and that's the way that they're facing. And so you've got desks on your right-hand side, you've got desk on your left-hand side.
Shoving us into a damn closet and closing the door behind us, right? That's what that feels like.
Not to me. I mean, to me, there's specific... to me, I look at it this way, is that the way that a desk is set up in a corporate environment, if it's set up like this, where we've got this little pod and everybody's kind of facing away from each other, is that there are certain things that we do for the bulk of the day that are pretty much an isolated thing that only we can work on. And so really, how much of your day is spent up looking at other people, talking to them when you're trying to draft something up, or when you're trying to respond to an RFI or review a submittal, or any of those other things. Those are things that you pretty much have to singularly focus in on what you're doing. And that's probably why the evolution between what we do in school and what we do in the profession are distinctly different. Whereas everybody's facing each other to really talk about what it is that they're doing, And what we're talking, what we're doing is so you asked, what's the difference? Well, in the corporate world, we're beholden to clients. We're beholden to a schedule. We're beholden to deadlines. And so we're more singularly focused on getting the tasks done so that we can remain billable. We can keep submitting our invoices to people and keep getting paid. And
wait a minute. You just said beholden to schedule, clients, and I forget the
milestones.
And milestones. Yeah, you're beholden to all of those in studio,
no matter
right?
What,
you got
no matter which
you got your
direction
teacher, you have your deadline and your schedule. You have all those same things in studio.
I totally, yeah. The labor laws have completely screwed all this up. I mean, that to me is one of the worst things that could happen to a creative field like this. But I can go into that more in a minute. But finish what you were going to say, Cormac.
I'm stuck now on the labor laws have destroyed creativity.
No, you got to show up in this time. You got to leave at that time. You have to be creative during the day. You can't be creative after work because we're not paying you for that. There's all kinds of things like that just don't work at all. But nobody's willing to actually rethink
again.
That stuff.
It's because we're beholden to clients. Clients work on, in most of the time, they're on their 9-to-5 schedule. So for us to be productive when we're working with clients and stuff like that, we're kind of stuck. We've geared our profession to work on our client schedules, to work on contractor schedules and things like that. So it's essentially a 9-to-5 type job. We've always felt like, we're productive whenever we feel like we're productive. We are creative whenever we feel like we're creative. But that doesn't necessarily work with the schedules of the people that we're actually working for. Not our boss.
I guess I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that I'm creative when I'm creative and you can't really control when that happens. Like, you actually get good at that by doing it, right? You actually do sit down and show up every day, and you don't have to wait until the inspiration strikes. And you're right, we do have to definitely work within all of it's a huge team, right? And everybody does have to have overlapping hours. But I don't think that we've really ever gone away from this tradition just because this is how we do it. I don't think it really has been rethought in a new way that because everything is so mobile and technology has allowed us to be untethered. This is one industry, architecture, that is so slow to adopt that kind of stuff that just because I have to work at the same hour doesn't mean I have to do it in the same chair every day. But we still have a very much an ass in seat mentality.
Okay, so. And that could be a completely different topic all in its own right, because being mobile and having the ability to work in multiple places isn't essentially that a cubicle in its own right, because now you're taking yourself out of the collaborative or having the ability to have a collaborative environment, and the only collaboration that you really would be doing is in a digital format. You're not ass in seat looking at somebody else talking to them and really kind of reacting based off of that.
Well, I'm pretty sure you don't believe that, right? I'm pretty sure that the face-to-face is really important to you. But all I'm saying, I guess, is a distinction based on something you said earlier, which is you are answering RFIs and you want to work a certain way at a certain time based on the task at hand. And so to me, and this is what I'll do our sponsor break here and then get into this, but we need flexible work environments that allow us to do different types of work in different types of scenarios, so that you're not, because sometimes you need to be collaborative. You do not need to be collaborative all the time. You're absolutely right. But we need office environments that enable that to happen, and a cube is not that thing.
Right.
That's where I'm going with that. I mean, it's we're starting to get into the nitty-gritty of this, but back to the original thing where we want to kind of lift the veil and say what it's like working in a corporate environment coming out of a architecture school. This is exactly the kind of stuff that people run up against, and it is shocking to the system to go from a studio environment to sitting in the same seat for the same hours every single day. And I think that's kind of the root of all this. And we all are still feeling this, even though we've been working in the field for a very long time.
Because I think we still long for it.
Totally right. That's exactly it. Let's take a quick break and we'll talk about ARCAT. ARCAT is our sponsor once again. Thank you, ARCAT. So we're all pretty busy, and sometimes we feel like we could use another hand to help out. Would you like someone to draw CAD details for you? Would you like someone to take those monotonous details off your plate? Would you like someone to create BIM objects or write specifications? And how would you like all of that done for free? ARCAT is your answer, and ARCAT has already done all this work for you. Search the ARCAT libraries for CAD, BIM, specs, catalogs, videos, and more. All this content created for you, free of charge and no registration required. So you can stop registering on sites for content. Just come to ARCAT and find what you need. ARCAT has created a website devoted to you, the building professional, to find product information fast and hassle-free. Check out ARCAT today at arcat.com. And don't forget, you can provide feedback on the site. This is something that they've asked us to let everybody know about. If you go to the website, you can click the button on the right side of every page and make suggestions to help make ARCAT better. So that's definitely something they're looking for. So use ARCAT, figure out what you need from them, and let them know. And thank you, ARCAT, for sponsoring this episode of Archispeak. All right, so jumping back into the conversation, I think something that we have something similar to what you guys have. We don't have these pods that everybody's kind of facing in four opposite directions, kind of like the compass, right? One person's facing north, one person's facing south, so everybody's back is to each other. And I've been to your office, Cormac. I know exactly what you're talking about. Ours is a little different. We have rows of cubicles, and everybody's kind of facing a different direction, so we don't have these clusters. But something that we identified maybe a year ago, and something that I don't know, I hate using this word, but I championed this idea to...
there's some good corporate speak.
Yeah. Let's do pods. And the reason we want to do pods is because we want the design team, the architecture team, to work on the project from beginning to end facing each other. And it was very important, based on all the research that I did and then thinking back to studio and looking at all this stuff, was that everybody needs to face each other and not be facing the opposite direction. And the reason for that was because you learn more. You get to hear their conversations because they're right there and they're talking in your direction. And I have to say, there's a lot of people who are like, this will never work. And I've done it on 2 projects myself, but we've done it on 4 or 5 projects now in our studio. And the reason we keep on doing it is because it keeps getting better and better. And the most interesting thing is you take people from different parts of the studio, they leave their desk for the duration of the project, and they go sit in the pod. And it was hard to get people to do that initially. It's very hard to get people to come out of their comfort zone, of their cube, and come work in a pod. And so a lot of times I was sitting in the pod by myself for 2 or 3 weeks, just inviting people to come, and nobody would come. Once they did come, they didn't want to leave, and we've had a lot of really good feedback, especially from people who you wouldn't have expected it from, who are people who are very introverted, because they tend to isolate themselves even more than the cubicle already does, or their headphones already do. And just naturally, they want to be in their own head, and they're very comfortable there, and they can figure things out, and they can crank on work. But they were put in this environment where they had to sit next to somebody. And so we have these 8-foot-long desks, and there's 2 people on this side, and then there's another 8-foot-long desk, and there's 2 people on the other side, and they're all facing each other. And these projects have done so well. And so if you want to speak back to the reason you're there is to make the company money, this totally fits the bill. And it's collaborative, and people are learning. So you have a project manager there, you've got a designer there, you've got somebody doing drafting, you've got a project architect, and everybody's having these conversations with each other all the time. I don't have to get up and walk across the office to ask somebody a question. They're right there. I don't have to call you. I don't have to email you. I can just ask. And just the kind of ease of communication has made things so much better. And the reason why I brought up just before the sponsor break there about having different work environments to enable you to work in different ways is important. And this is something we really haven't done yet, but we're working on. friend of mine and I are like redesigning the whole studio. But the idea is that, yeah, sometimes you have to go make a private phone call, right? Or sometimes you need to go have a private conversation with somebody, and you're not going to do that there. But for the most part, you can and you should, because especially with younger hires or, I don't know, employees, you want them to hear this stuff so they get the information firsthand. They're part and own the project because they hear all this stuff, and they know that they're just learning and soaking this stuff up from people who have been at the firm for much longer. And they're gaining that valuable information that is so lost in most firms where there are partitions between desks, because they're just not exposed to it. And so, yeah, they're listening to that difficult conversation with the consultant, and they're listening to that conversation between the PIC and the project manager of, why didn't you do this? And, oh, I did that. I thought I was supposed to do this. And they're just learning through osmosis, right? And this is an amazing thing. And we've gotten feedback from these kids who have come in to their first job, and they're like, I'm getting another education right now. And this has been amazing. And so our feedback has been really, really positive. There are definitely people who are saying, I wish I had more space. I wish I had more layout space. I wish I had my thing. But for the most part, we actually don't hear that. We hear, man, like, I feel like I'm becoming an architect. And so that has been paying dividends. It's really cool.
And it's good because it's essentially mentoring without any effort, because everybody's kind of involved with everything.
Yeah. And it's been great because we did it in these closed conference rooms because that's where we had space. And we worked through that project, and it was great inside the room. The door was closed, and anybody could say whatever they wanted. We called it the HR-free zone, right? And then, but I realized very quickly that it was going to be really important for the next iteration of the pod to be out on the production floor, because everybody needed to see it. Everybody had to experience it. Even if they weren't part of that team, they got to see what happened. And so now we have a team pod that every Thursday at 4:30 has happy hour. And they just say, hey, everybody in the studio, come on over to our pod and let's have happy hour and let's hang out together. And they do slideshows. They share their summer vacations. I mean, we're doing that this week. We've done it in the past weeks too, where a friend of mine's going to be showing his summer vacation to Switzerland in the pod. I mean, and so these become attractors for people who they want to walk by when they're doing their laps through the office, and they want to see what people are doing there because these people are having conversations out loud. And the funny thing is, like, we've all done this. This is exactly what we all experienced in studio, but there was this culture shift, and it's been like this for a very long time, where when you go to work for an office, the situation, the environment changes. And so it's pretty funny. All we're trying to do is undo that and put it back to what it was like to be in studio, because that is where creativity happens. That is where we solve problems together, and we use the C word. We collaborate all the time, and that's just it's actually working out amazingly well. So we've kind of sprinkled them throughout the studio so that they're not concentrated in one specific area, and that right there has been one of the key elements to creating a collaborative work environment that is a lot like being back in studio again.
You know, it's interesting you bring that up, because I remember seeing an image. One of my favorite architects is Brian McKay Lyons, and you go to his website and there's all sorts of nice and interesting projects and stuff. But one image that always captivated me, and I'll see if I can find it, is they show kind of an aerial shot of the studio, of the architectural studio. And what it was just a big, huge, long table with a couple of little offshoot tables, or just like little things where you could put your computer. But for the most part, you were sitting at an extraordinarily large, basically family table.
Yeah.
And what struck me is, could I work in an environment like that? I mean, I am that kind of introverted person where I'd prefer to kind of just have my space and do my thing. And it's not that I'm trying to be an isolationist, but sometimes what it does is that, it just kind of like lets me be productive in my own way. But I look at these, and you talking about the pod is brought up, that image from McKay Lyons' Sweet Apple Architects is what it's called now. And I'll hunt down that image so we can put it in our show notes and everybody can take a look at it, because it sounds very similar to this pod notion where everybody is sitting there.
Yes, and that is a key part, and I was going to bring that up, is it is even better if you can get people out of their offices so that there is no visual hierarchy to it. And the reason why is because, again, everybody's learning through osmosis of all of the issues that you have to learn to become an architect and how to run a business in architecture. That is one of the things that people get so isolated from doing production, right? Is how to actually run the business. And so then next year comes and you get a bonus and you get an increase, and at some point you become expected to know how to run the firm. Yet you've never done that.
Right.
Because you've always been isolated from it. And it's stupid, right? It's like, why are we doing this to ourselves? Everybody should be in the environment of, here's what I do. I'm just going to do it out in front of everybody on purpose. And it's not like you're doing it in front of an audience. Nobody's sitting there staring at you with their mouth agape, just trying to figure out what the hell's going on. Right. They're doing their work too, right? But they're sucking it in. They're getting it in their subconscious, and then their mind is processing it. And even though they're not doing what you're doing, they get to see you do it. They get to see how you handle situations. And pretty soon they're going to be able to do it themselves. I mean, obviously training's going to help too, but this is just one of those ways that we can enable people to get there.
One of my favorite comments from a recent graduate that was working with me, this was back at the other firm I work for, they'd just graduated, they'd been in the studio environment this whole time. They'd worked for a few weeks at the firm, kind of stuck chained to their desk and kind of doing all sorts of things, toilet room plans, I'm sure, and stuff like that. But so then they joined my team, and the first thing that I always love to do is take them out to the job site and just let them see what it is that and I've said this countless times on the podcast, but let them see what it is that they're drawing. Let them understand that the beam overhead is the line on their paper and all that other stuff. But we went through so many different meetings, and they were just there. Essentially, I was just thinking, they can be there to take notes. It's what we always tend to do with interns and stuff. Is that, you just take the meeting minutes. But what I realized then, and it helped kind of let me grow a little bit in a way that I could mentor, is exposing them to let them see everything, lift that veil, and let them see everything that we do. The good, the bad, the ugly. When we're sitting in a construction meeting, we're arguing with the client or the contractors or something about whether it's a change order or whether it's a change in a detail or whatever. And she said to me, she goes, I didn't realize that architecture was so much management. And it sort of is. It is very much management of all these different facets, but it's more in this particular case, it was just a management of exposure, getting them exposed to all of the different things. That's why I really like and am really interested to learn more about the kind of this pod concept, because if you're sitting at this family table and you've got the head of the table is the principal all the way down to the kids table where you've got interns and stuff and the folding card table. And where they put the crazy Uncle Neil. But I mean,
really,
Uncle Neil, why don't they let you sit at the table?
Why don't they let you sit at the grown-ups table?
Anyway, but I like it because everybody hears the conversations. Everybody sees what everybody else is doing. And maybe you don't always get a chance to see the principal as they're talking about or negotiating a contract. But how much of a valuable tool is that exposure, that simple exposure of overhearing it? You may not be able to write a proposal after you've listened to them, but you at least know some of the nuances of things that happen when you're exposed to it. Hell, I'm kind of excited. I'm awake now.
So there's a couple other key components to it too that are just things that you should have there, I think. And this is stuff, again, that we had this stuff when we were in school too. But you need pinup space. You need a whiteboard. You could use a projector. Everybody can just gather around a monitor, no problem. But if you have a larger screen, that helps. But a whiteboard is pretty key, because if you want to draw a detail and have everybody, hey guys, let's solve this problem. Let's do it right here, analog, right? It's huge. It's you want to have lists of things that people need to take care of, put them on the whiteboard. The cool thing about that is everybody in the firm gets to see what you're working on and what he's working on and what she's working on. this is important information that gets conveyed that normally people stick on a sticky note and slap it on their monitor, right? But now it's up for everybody to see. So it's not simply that everybody is sitting there facing each other. And I totally think that there are lots of digital collaboration tools that allow this to happen remotely too. You know, we've talked about Slack before. We've talked about Evernote. There's all kinds of interesting stuff that you could use to do all this. The key, at least in the beginning, and the reason why I think that this has so much value in a company, and I know we've kind of strayed away from our original topic, but let's just run with it, is that we've been able to have people who we didn't know what kinds of talents they had because they hadn't been asked to do a lot of different types of work, be put into these teams, and they have excelled because they've gotten a wider range of experience. And I mean, it's been one of those things where we didn't know that this group of people was an A team.
Yeah.
Until we put them in that situation and we said, prove it, right? And they did. And they've done it over and over again. And we've been able to take, you know, what happens when you go work in these larger offices is you get a team of people who works on a project, right? And then that project wraps up, and then that team moves to another project, and then that project wraps up. And because of the way availability and staffing works in offices, that tends to be the way that we go from project to project working with the same people. What we've done is intentionally tried to break that, to find out where our A players are. And the amazing thing is these teams have become A player teams. And every time we mix it up intentionally, and it's like, holy crap, we've got another A team. Look at these people. And then, oh my God, look at the way that project is performing. It's performing amazingly. And that's a totally different group of people. And so it's just been able to be one of those things that has shown value in so many different ways. I mean, people are learning, people are taking on new responsibilities, they're being supported by their peers, and it's just paid off in so many different ways that it is an exciting thing. I'm glad to hear you're excited about it, but it's been pretty simple to employ and then iterate on. I mean, one thing I was very clear about in the beginning was this is experimental. These are not the answers. Like, this is just the latest thing. We're going to try this. And what happens when we do it the next time? What are we going to tweak? And I think that's a really good just way to look at it, is how are we going to make it even better next time? And that's what we keep doing. And actually saying that out loud to people who are like, I don't know if this is going to work. I've said that out loud to them, and they're like, oh, really? Like, you know, you're so confident about it. It seems like this is set in stone. No, you tell me what's going to make it better next time. And they're like, wow, you're asking me? Like, I didn't think that my opinion mattered, or I thought you guys had this all figured out and I wasn't allowed to give you my ideas. And that should not be the outlook that you have when you start something like this. I think it's one of those things where you look at it like it's experimental, you iterate, you do it better the next time, you take advice, you take ideas, you employ them into it, and you do it, and people get to feel like they own the whole process,
right? Not
just the outcome of the process.
I can't stress enough that that's a huge, valuable educational tool.
Yeah, it is. It's been awesome. So I think that's one of the things that people could look for when they go interviewing at different companies when they get out of school or when they're making that transition, is look at the way the work environment works, right? Is it cubes? Is it collaborative? Is it the big family table? Does it look like an architect's office, or does it look like a studio, or does it look corporate and clean and quiet? And those are all clues into the ways.
Do they have pin-up space? Do they have, like...
Does it... Yeah. What's on the walls? Is it trace paper, or is it final renderings? Like, all this stuff kind of clues you in. Are there models sitting around? Are there 3D prints sitting around? I mean, that was one thing I loved about your office, Cormac, was just the number of models everywhere. It's like, holy crap, I'm in an architecture office. Like this feels good.
Oh, yeah. Even at my level of experience, and as many times as I've been in other architecture offices and other professional offices and stuff, I was interviewing for a new job. And so I was nervous. And what was interesting is I walked into this firm, and I immediately took a deep sigh of relief. I took a deep breath, and I was like,
they get
this
it, right?
Is a place I want to be. I can just tell because it felt like an architecture off. It felt, a cross between corporate and studio. It had the shiny images because it's been around for 100 years, of all of its different works and things like that. And it should be proud of all of that. But then and it's not hidden from public view, but when you look around the corner, you see the inner workings of the office, and it's not clean. It's got a little grime to it, but it's got models. We've got a model shop. We've got all these different things. There's trace and paper up all over the walls and everything, and there's progress, and people are standing around talking about architecture and conversing about it. And are there things that we could do a little bit better? Sure, but to be quite honest with you, there's a direction there that doesn't need to be tweaked too far to get it to this kind of collaborative environment or this integrated design practice type thing that is kind of the buzzword recently. But I think that, places like that, I got lucky.
Yeah, definitely. All good tips to kind of things to look for when you're just out there kind of job seeking and touring offices, and that's another way to do it. Just tour. If you got a friend who works there, or find out, it's easier now with social networking to hook up and just say, hey, can I get a tour in your office? I'd love to just come by for 15 or 20 minutes or half an hour, whatever you can spare, so I can check it out. That's a cool thing.
I know this is a little bit different, but one other piece of advice that I would say, and it's a little off topic, but very much on topic with what you're looking for. We're talking about kind of like the feel of an architecture firm, but there is one other thing that I learned so late in my career that I want to tell everybody early in their career. Talk to the employees, not to the bosses, not to the principals, not to the people who are interviewing you. Talk to the employees. Get a feel for what it is like to work at that place from their perspective.
Take them out for coffee. Yeah. That's the people you're going to be sitting next to, working through all of this stuff on a day-to-day basis. You're not going to be sitting next to the principal unless you've got the big pod table or the family table type thing, which is awesome in its own right. But talk to the people that you're going to be working with. Get a feel from them, because I swear you will have a much better view of the place you're going to work when you're talking to those people. Yep, for sure.
All true. I want to go work in your office, Evan. That sounds like fun.
It is. It's an amazing thing. I mean, and it's spreading. I think that's kind of the idea that we have been pushing for, is show that it works, and then once people start to see it, make them ask for it. Like, don't just give it to them. Don't just equity everywhere with this kind of a thing, because I think people actually they have to want it. If they don't want it, it's going to be hard to convince them or make them do anything, right? So show them how great it is, and then make them ask for it. And once they ask for it, say, yeah, give it, here it is, right? And then it spreads, and people have their own victories, and they have their own stories to tell that make it successful for them. It doesn't all have to be the same. So very, very worthwhile to start small and let it get bigger, organically.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. I'd really be curious for our listeners to actually chime in with us on this and let us know what their office environments are like, and if they're set up and they're utilizing this sort of pod environment, or if they're working in cubes. Let us know. I think it'd be quite interesting. So before we go here, let's give a quick shout out to ARCAT again. Thank you very much for sponsoring this episode. Check them out at arcat.com. That's arcat.com. And for our list to our catalog of episodes, visit our website at archispeakpodcast.com. At the site, you can also sign up for our newsletter that includes links to everything we mentioned in the episode. And between episodes, join in on the conversation by leaving comments at archispeakpodcast.com or on our Facebook page, or even through Twitter. We like interacting with the listeners. So links for all of those can be found by visiting the site at archispeakpodcast.com. And thanks for listening, everyone. Good night.
Thanks. See you next time.
Thank you.
It's a slow road, but you have to walk it. You can start now, or you can hang your head in despair. The only road will take you there. So never recover, baby. I've learned one thing or another about you. a crack doctor, a mother of earth. And if they don't know how to hold a woman, maybe you can put them back in their place. They could use a little bit of discipline and a hand across their face. Baby, let's pretend we're doing karate, and while we're at it, have the opposite day. Some like to hug, some leave a bruise, and stop mixed up. I'm ready for you. Let's pretend we're doing karate, and while we're at it, have the opposite day. Some like to hug, some leave a bruise, and stop mixed up. I'm ready for you. Some like to hug.